What if I told you that Carl Jung, one of the most brilliant minds in psychology, identified 9 specific signs that your soul is undergoing a profound transformation, but these signs are so subtle that most people completely miss them? Before we dive into these life-changing insights, make sure to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell because this video contains information that could completely shift how you understand your spiritual journey. And trust me, you'll want to watch this entire video to discover which of these 9 signs you might be experiencing right now without even realizing it. Carl Jung spent decades studying the human psyche and what he called the process of individuation, which is essentially the journey of becoming who you truly are at the deepest level. Through his work with thousands of patients and his own personal experiences, Jung discovered that when our soul begins to rise and awaken, it sends us very specific signals that most people either ignore or misinterpret as something else entirely. These aren't the typical spiritual awakening signs you might read about online, but rather the hidden, often uncomfortable indicators that your consciousness is expanding and your authentic self is fighting to emerge from beneath layers of conditioning and societal expectations. The first hidden sign Jung identified is what he called the emergence of meaningful coincidences or synchronicities that seem to follow you everywhere you go. Now, you might think this sounds like wishful thinking or confirmation bias, but Jung's research revealed something far more profound. When your soul is rising, your unconscious mind begins to align with what Jung termed the collective unconscious, creating a bridge between your inner world and external reality. You start noticing that conversations, books, songs, or even random encounters seem to directly address whatever you've been thinking about or struggling with internally. The number sequences you see, the people you randomly meet, the opportunities that appear out of nowhere, these aren't just coincidences anymore. They're your psyche's way of communicating that you're becoming more attuned to the deeper patterns of existence. Jung believed that synchronicities increase dramatically during periods of psychological transformation because your expanding consciousness is literally becoming more sensitive to the interconnected web of meaning that underlies all experience. The second sign is something Jung called the activation of the shadow, and this one catches most people completely off guard because it feels like you're going backwards in your spiritual development. Suddenly, you start noticing aspects of your personality that you thought you had overcome years ago. Old patterns of jealousy, anger, fear, or insecurity seem to resurface with surprising intensity. You might find yourself having thoughts or impulses that shock you because they seem so unlike the person you believe yourself to be. But here's what Jung discovered. This isn't regression, it's actually integration. When your soul begins to rise, it demands wholeness, and wholeness means acknowledging and accepting all parts of yourself, including the parts you've been trying to hide or deny. The shadow contains not only your repressed negative traits, but also your unlived potential, your suppressed creativity, and the aspects of yourself that society taught you were unacceptable. As your consciousness expands, these shadow elements rise to the surface not to torment you, but to be healed, integrated, and transformed into sources of authentic power and self-understanding. The third hidden sign involves what Jung termed the disillusion of the persona, which is the mask or false self you've constructed to navigate social expectations and gain approval from others. When your soul is rising, this carefully crafted identity begins to feel increasingly restrictive and inauthentic. You might notice that maintaining your usual social roles feels exhausting in a way it never did before. The career that once defined you might suddenly feel meaningless. Relationships that were based on superficial connections might feel hollow, and activities that used to bring you satisfaction now leave you feeling empty. This isn't depression in the clinical sense, it's your authentic self rejecting the limitations of who you thought you had to be. Jung observed that this disillusion phase is often accompanied by a sense of not knowing who you are anymore, which can be terrifying but is actually a sign that you're making room for your true self to emerge. The discomfort you feel is your soul outgrowing the container of your old identity. The fourth sign Jung identified is the activation of what he called the transcendent function, which manifests as an unusual increase in vivid dreams, symbolic imagery, and creative insights that seem to come from somewhere beyond your normal conscious mind. Your dreams become more intense, more meaningful, and often contain symbols or scenarios that feel ancient and universal rather than personal. You might start having dreams about flying, encountering wise figures, discovering hidden rooms in familiar places, or experiencing landscapes that feel more real than waking reality. During waking hours, you might find yourself drawn to create art, music, or writing without any particular training or previous interest in these areas. Ideas and solutions seem to download into your consciousness from an unknown source. Jung understood that when the soul is rising, the boundary between the conscious and unconscious mind becomes more permeable, allowing wisdom and guidance from the deeper layers of the psyche to flow more freely into awareness. This transcendent function serves as a bridge between your ordinary consciousness and the vast reservoir of knowledge and creativity that exists within the collective unconscious. The fifth sign Jung identified is the emergence of what he called the anima or animus, which are the feminine and masculine aspects that exist in every person regardless of their biological gender. When your soul is rising, these complementary energies within you seek balance and expression. If you're typically very logical and analytical, you might suddenly find yourself drawn to intuition, emotion, and artistic expression. If you're usually nurturing and emotionally focused, you might discover a new desire for achievement, leadership, or intellectual pursuits. This integration isn't about becoming someone different, it's about becoming whole by accessing the full spectrum of human potential that exists within you. Jung observed that people experiencing this integration often go through periods where they feel like they're living as a completely different person. But what's actually happening is that suppressed aspects of their nature are finally being allowed to surface and find expression. The sixth sign involves what Jung termed the constellation of archetypal energies, which means that universal patterns and themes begin to play out dramatically in your life. You might find yourself in situations that feel mythic in their intensity and significance. Perhaps you're called to be a healer and suddenly find people seeking your guidance and support in ways that surprise you. Maybe you discover your inner warrior and find yourself standing up for causes or principles you never would have defended before. You could find yourself in the role of the wise mentor, the rebel, the creator, or the seeker in ways that feel both natural and larger than your personal identity. These archetypal energies are like cosmic roles that human beings have played throughout history, and when your soul is rising, you become a conscious participant in these universal dramas rather than just being unconsciously driven by them. The seventh hidden sign Jung identified is the development of what he called the religious consciousness, but this isn't necessarily about traditional religion or belief systems. Instead, it's a growing awareness that existence itself is sacred and meaningful. You might find yourself having profound experiences in nature where you feel connected to something vast and intelligent. Ordinary moments like watching a sunset, listening to music, or having a conversation with a friend might suddenly take on transcendent qualities that leave you feeling awestruck and humbled. This religious consciousness often manifests as an unshakable knowing that life is more than just random events and chemical reactions. You begin to sense an underlying order and purpose that connects everything, and this awareness fundamentally changes how you relate to yourself and the world around you. Jung saw this as the natural result of the psyche's movement toward wholeness and integration. The eighth sign is the emergence of what Jung called the wise old man or wise old woman archetype within your own psyche. This manifests as moments when you seem to access wisdom that goes far beyond your personal experience or education. You might find yourself saying things that surprise you with their depth and insight, or making decisions based on an inner knowing that you can't fully explain but trust completely. People might start coming to you for advice or guidance, sensing that you have access to something valuable and authentic. This isn't about becoming egotistical or thinking you're better than others. It's about recognizing that you've gained access to the collective wisdom that Jung believed exists in all human beings, but is usually buried under layers of conditioning and fear.
The ninth and final hidden sign Jung identified is perhaps the most profound, the experience of what he called the self with a capital S, which is different from your everyday ego self. The self, in Jung's understanding, is the organizing principle of your entire psyche, the part of you that has always known who you truly are and what you're meant to contribute to the world. When your soul is rising toward full awakening, you begin to have direct experiences of this deeper self. These moments might come as sudden realizations about your life's purpose, experiences of unconditional self-love and acceptance, or profound feelings of connection to all life. You might have moments where you feel like you're seeing yourself and your life from a much higher perspective, where all your experiences, both positive and negative, suddenly make sense as part of a larger pattern of growth and development. Jung considered contact with the self to be the ultimate goal of human psychological development, the point where you stop living as a fragmented collection of roles and reactions and begin living as a coherent, authentic whole. Now, here's what Jung discovered that might surprise you. Experiencing these signs isn't always comfortable or pleasant. In fact, the process of soul awakening often involves what he called a dark night of the soul, where everything you thought you knew about yourself and reality gets turned upside down. You might go through periods of intense confusion, emotional upheaval, or feeling completely lost. This is normal and actually necessary because your old way of being has to dissolve before your authentic self can fully emerge. Jung emphasized that this process can't
Be rushed or forced. It has its own timing and rhythm that must be respected. The key to navigating this transformation successfully is what Jung called conscious suffering, which means staying present and aware during the difficult phases rather than trying to escape or numb the discomfort. He believed that every psychological symptom, every crisis, every uncomfortable emotion contains valuable information about what needs to be healed, integrated, or transformed. By approaching your awakening process with curiosity and compassion rather than resistance, you allow your soul to rise naturally into its full expression. If you're experiencing any of these 9 hidden signs, Jung would say that you're in the midst of one of the most important journeys a human being can undertake. The process of individuation and soul awakening isn't just about personal fulfillment. It's about becoming who you truly are so that you can offer your unique gifts to the world in a way that serves the collective healing and evolution of humanity. Remember, this journey is uniquely yours, and while these signs provide a general map, your specific path will unfold in its own perfect timing and way.